Title: Capitalism as a Cognitive Loop, a Phenomenological Diagnosis. Before we dive in, here's what I promised to deliver in this video. 3 things. First, I'm going to explain what capitalism is, not as an economic model, but as a cognitive structure. Second, I'll show how learning systems, including your brain, tend to reinforce what already works, and when the brain does that, it does 2 things. One good, one dangerous. The good, you succeed. The dangerous, you forget that this success is just a particular pattern of success, one that, over time, had to exclude entire styles of failure, entire meanings that might have been yours if the dice had rolled differently. Third, I'll trace the intellectual lineage behind this critique, from Hegel to Marx to the Frankfurt School. So you leave here not just with opinions, but with real philosophical firepower. To do that, I'll mix narration, metaphor, and argument into a cognitive cocktail, designed not just to reflect thought, but to upgrade it. Now that we're clear on the stakes, let's talk about trolls. Brief disclaimer. Before we begin, a quick note. This channel isn't just a space for ideas. It's an attempt to build a philosophical ecosystem. And building something like that means understanding not just the arguments, but the medium they move through. In this case, that medium includes AI-generated voices and visuals, all directed by me. These tools aren't just cosmetic. They shape how the work is received, interpreted, and situated. And nothing reveals more about the stakes of this process than the backlash it provokes. Panic dressed as principle, performance disguised as defense of authenticity. People who never missed originality now suddenly demand it, as if threatened not by automation, but by the loss of control over meaning itself. So yes, in every frame, every sentence, every glitch, you'll find traces of mediation, not as a gimmick, but as part of the argument. Because the future of thought online isn't just about content, it's about how consciousness reorganizes itself through the tools it learns to use. Let's begin. So, what does capitalism have to do with cognitive science? Imagine this. You're a brain, not a metaphorical one, a literal meat and electricity prediction engine trapped in a skull. Your job is simple. Survive the world by finding patterns in chaos and betting on them. Now, imagine you realize something strange. The patterns you're best at learning are the ones you've already learned. Congratulations. You've just invented cognitive conservatism, and also, maybe, capitalism. See, cognition tends toward uniformity, not because the world is uniform, but because once you lock into a schema that works, a pattern that predicts outcomes, a form that gives you fewer surprises, your brain gets lazy, efficient, economical. Learning systems, both natural and artificial, tend to reinforce what can be learned. And more to the point, what's already been learned. They optimize for what fits, not what breaks the frame. That's where homogenization comes in. You start getting not truth, but reproducibility, not discovery, but confirmation. Even errors become part of the model, not as exceptions, but as normalized deviations wrapped in statistical forgiveness. Now, zoom out. Take this process, the feedback loops, the reinforcement of past learning, the alignment of error with projected success, and watch it metastasize from a local learning strategy to an entire economic system. That's capitalism, a social epistemology that rewards only the kind of behavior that already works, that is, sells, scales, succeeds. In this view, capitalism is not just about markets. It's a meta-pattern of success criteria, a feedback loop on how to define value, truth, and error. The invisible hand is just a glorified loss function. So when people say, we live in a capitalist society, they mean something much deeper than economics. They mean we live in a society where the brain's own preference for epistemic efficiency has become the measure of the world. You think capitalism alienates? Try running a neural net on novelty alone. It will fail. It has to be trained on what's already legible. So maybe capitalism didn't hijack human psychology. Maybe it is human psychology, externalized, scaled, and monetized. And if that's true, then sociology depends on psychology. And psychology? It depends on the kinds of cognition that don't ask what's true, but what's learnable. Final addendum: Hegel, Marx, and the false mirror. And for those of you still trying to triangulate what this is, no, it's not Marxism. But yes, Marx did try to do something like this. He got it from Hegel, long before neural networks, before cognitive science wrapped itself in probabilistic robes. Hegel was already there, not building algorithms, but exposing how thought itself becomes a system, a dialectic that folds in on itself, that becomes alien to itself in the process of becoming universal. That's what is happening today, when every aspect of life is automated, outsourced, and delegated, to market algorithms, to bureaucratic procedures, to statistical dashboards. And Marx? Well, Marx took that dialectic and pointed it at capital. He didn't just study markets. He studied capitalism as a distorted cognitive system, a way in which contradictions are not just economic, but epistemic, structures of dissonance, of misrecognition, of fetishism. Now, full disclosure, I don't think Marx pulled it off entirely. He had the right gesture, but the wrong toolkit. The Frankfurt school, in my view, got closer, especially thinkers like Adorno, who understood that contradiction isn't just material, it's perceptual. It lives in the way we experience society, not just in how we model it. So yes, this video, this approach, it walks the same road Hegel paved, passes by the station where Marx changed trains, and maybe sets foot in that neglected platform where phenomenology and critical theory still wave in the wind. But that's for another video. Epilogue. The part where it all gets interesting. Now, if you're wondering, as some always do, where does this come from? Did I pull it from ChatGPT's neural stomach? This isn't regurgitated TED Talk psychology. It's not neuroaesthetics in a PowerPoint suit. And it's not just cognitive science. Because, to be honest with you, and with myself, I'm not a cognitive scientist. I'm a phenomenologist with a cognitive science disguise. I study the preconditions for sense, the why behind the how we make meaning. Cognitive science, for all its achievements, treats meaning as a function of computation, representation, and pattern stability. But phenomenology? Phenomenology starts before all that. It studies sense before system, the lived, the situated, the embedded. what Merleau-Ponty called la chair du monde, the flesh of the world. Where cognitive science builds models of mind, phenomenology examines how mind models the world, not as data, but as significance. And significance doesn't live in symbols. It lives in experience, gesture, narrative, memory, and yes, error too. But not just the error of prediction, the error of being. So while I borrow the language of learning systems and feedback loops, my root system runs deeper, through Husserl, Merleau-Ponty, Heidegger, and Michel Henry, through Sartre's sedimentations and even Lacan's missed appointments with the real. Meaning is not what your model tells you. It's what refuses to be fully modeled. And if capitalism mirrors a structure of cognition, then cognition itself may be more about reduction than revelation. And the real resistance is not in the data, but in the phenomenon that exceeds it. So no, this isn't just a take. It's a call to remember that long before your brain learned how to label, your body was already in the world, sensing more than it could ever say. That's not cognitive science. That's phenomenology. A nod to the resistant viewer. Some of you will hate this argument. That's good, because if your epistemic immune system didn't react, I'd assume you weren't awake. But if you're still here, still listening, I'd invite you to do something radical. Ask yourself whether the structures we call the world are really just scaffolding for what's cognitively palatable. And if that's true, then the next question is, who decides what gets learned? And let me be clear, we haven't even scratched the truly unsettling part, how cognitive conditioning, always leaning toward uniformity, doesn't just reinforce individual habits or social norms, but actually builds entire worlds. Worlds that later show up wearing the mask of philosophy, religion, folk metaphysics, ideological common sense. These aren't mistakes of reason. They're the logical outcome of systems built to automate prediction and suppress deviation. But between the machinery of markets and models and the open space they leave unresolved, lies the abyss where skepticism can still breathe, where awareness, or hypnosis, takes root. This channel is an attempt to walk that line, to build a space of shared metacognition, a place where we don't just ask what we think, but how our thinking got here, and whether it still deserves to stay.